Judge Judy's voice echoed through the packed courtroom at the moment Jasmine Crockett stepped forward. The Congresswoman's calm, composed face didn't flinch as the words hit like thunder. Judge Judy had just announced a $190,000 fine against her. The room fell into silence, reporters frozen, attorneys whispering to one another. Jasmine didn't even blink. The cameras caught the tension, the unease, the disbelief. Judge Judy, dressed in her iconic black robe and commanding the bench with her usual iron presence, leaned forward with narrowed eyes, repeating the number like a blade. "That's $190,000, Congresswoman Crockett." The bailiff turned to watch the reaction. But Jasmine just nodded slowly, her hands calmly folded in front of her, eyes locked straight ahead. She didn't plead. She didn't tremble. She inhaled, deep and still, like someone who had already prepared herself for the weight of the moment. Judge Judy wasn't being cruel. The courtroom had followed every word, every nuance of the heated hearings over the past 2 days. It had started with a complex defamation claim stemming from a televised exchange, escalated into a civil contempt motion, and finally landed on what everyone assumed was going to be a show trial. But Jasmine surprised them all. She didn't walk in with lawyers stacked high beside her. She didn't carry binders or talk in circles. She stood alone. When asked to defend her words, she spoke plainly, emotionally, directly. She didn't smear names or raise her voice. She quoted her constituents. She quoted her mother. She told the court she knew what it was like to be underestimated, to be called names, to be judged before you speak. Judge Judy listened, but didn't budge. The fine came anyway. Still, Jasmine's reaction wasn't denial. She stepped forward, asking the judge if she could say a few more words, not to plead, not to challenge the fine, but just to speak to the room. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Make it brief," she snapped, though something in her tone softened. Jasmine looked around at the reporters, the plaintiffs, even the court clerks. Her voice didn't rise above the buzz of the AC unit, but somehow everyone heard her. "If I'm going to be fined for speaking truth, I'll pay it," she said. "Not because I'm wrong, but because that's what sacrifice looks like sometimes. You carry the burden not because you deserve it, but because someone has to carry it for those who can't afford to." She looked directly at Judge Judy. "I walked in here knowing the price. What I said on behalf of every girl who grew up being told to be quiet when she was right. Every black woman told she was angry when she was passionate. Every public servant told to sit down when she stood up." There was a quiet rustle in the back. One of the spectators dabbed their eyes. The court reporter paused her typing. Judge Judy stared long and hard, her jaw clenched, fingers gripping the edge of the bench. For once, she didn't interrupt. The courtroom had seen a lot of testimony over the years. But there was something about this wasn't performance. It was something deeper, more settled. Jasmine turned toward the door as if she was finished. She wasn't walking out ashamed or defeated. She was leaving as someone who had said what she came to say. The court had the right to fine her. But no one could make her feel guilty for standing on truth. Judge Judy sat frozen for a moment as Jasmine Crockett turned her back to leave. The silence in the courtroom was thick. Even the gavel felt too heavy to lift. Reporters began scribbling again, trying to capture the electricity in the room. The plaintiff's side looked around nervously, unsure whether the moment had just shifted forever. Then, slowly, Judge Judy spoke not in her usual sharp tone, but something softer, almost reluctant. "Congresswoman Crockett, sit back down." Jasmine paused. Her heels stopped against the polished courtroom floor. She turned, calm but curious. She wasn't afraid. She just wanted to hear the next line. Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows on the bench, eyes not filled with authority now, but something more human. "You came in here knowing the weight on your shoulders," she said. "And you carried it with more dignity than most men I've fined this year combined." Jasmine returned to the front of the room and sat down still silent. Judge Judy looked down at her notes, then back up again, as if wrestling with herself. "I don't take back my ruling," she said. "But I'll say this for the record. I've seen arrogance in this courtroom. I've seen cowardice. I've seen people play games with truth. You, however, you came in here and stood still in a storm." A murmur swept through the benches behind them. Then, a voice came from the back row, an older woman who'd been watching from the public seats. "She speaks for me." Another voice, younger this time, "And me." Suddenly, it wasn't just murmurs. It was a quiet chorus of people nodding, agreeing, moved by what they had just witnessed. Jasmine wasn't a defendant anymore. She had become something else. A symbol, a truth-teller, a presence. Judge Judy tapped her pen once, trying to regain control of the room, but her voice cracked slightly when she spoke again. "I didn't bring you here to make this political," she said. "But I'd be a fool not to admit what you've done here is bigger than this case. Your courage. It reminds me of why I started doing this decades ago." The bailiff blinked. The stenographer sat motionless. "And Jasmine?" She stayed poised, but her eyes began to shine just slightly. Not because of the money, not because of pride, but because she knew this moment would echo louder than any headline. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, but her gaze didn't leave Jasmine Crockett's face. It wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It had become something heavier, a place where legacies were challenged and dignity was tested. Jasmine sat upright, her palms flat on the wooden table, calm but alert. She could feel the energy in the room shift. Something ancient was being stirred not by anger, but by truth. By pain that had been passed down and now finally had a face bold enough to hold it in full view. The cameras at the back zoomed in slowly, the red light blinking. The nation was watching, but Jasmine wasn't performing. She was living it. Judge Judy cleared her throat and picked up the court file again. But instead of reading from it, she set it aside. "We are a nation of laws," she said. "But laws mean nothing if we forget the humanity they were built to protect." Her voice cracked again, and this time she didn't try to hide it. "This fine stands, but not because you deserved it. It stands because this system hasn't caught up to women like you. Women who rise while being pushed down. Women who walk in truth when lies buy more applause." A pin could have dropped. Jasmine didn't move, but her eyes shifted toward the front row where her team sat, her staffers, her family, her community. They were still, some of them with tears pooling at the edge of their eyes. Judge Judy stood now. A rare move. She walked around the bench and stepped onto the floor. The courtroom collectively leaned forward, unsure what was happening. This wasn't just TV now. This was real. This was unscripted. This was history pressing its palm to the glass. Standing just a few feet away, Judge Judy looked Jasmine Crockett in the eyes and spoke so clearly the walls seemed to breathe in her words. "You don't owe this court an apology. You don't owe me one either." Her voice softened more. "But what you gave today, you gave a generation. You showed them that courage can speak soft and still break ceilings." Jasmine's jaw clenched, but she stayed still. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just absorbed it. Not because she needed validation, but because for once, the world stopped trying to shrink her. And in that stillness, a courtroom that had once been tense now felt sacred. Judge Judy turned to the courtroom. "This hearing is adjourned," she said, and for the first time in a long time, her gavel didn't fall with force. It landed gently, like a blessing being laid down instead of a sentence. And still, Jasmine sat for a moment more, as if letting every second of it sink deep into her bones. Not because she had won the case, but because for the first time, the truth didn't have to scream to be heard. The courtroom didn't empty. Not yet. People stayed frozen in their seats, even though the gavel had sounded. There was something about what had just happened, like history had shifted a few inches in the right direction, and no one wanted to move for fear of waking from it. Judge Judy was halfway back to her bench, but she turned again. And then, without any announcement, she looked at the bailiff and said firmly, "Hold the cameras." The red lights on every feed switched off in unison. There were still journalists and court sketch artists in the room, but the national live feed was cut. What came next wasn't for headlines. It was for something more human. Jasmine stood now. She didn't speak yet. She just looked around the room slowly, her gaze landing briefly on each face she recognized, each person who had stood beside her when this battle began. Her voice came, not loud, not fiery, just raw. "I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this courtroom, not in politics. Not in rooms where decisions are made about people who look like me, who speak like me, who come from where I come from." Her hand moved toward the microphone, but she didn't need it. "Every step I've taken has been with the weight of stories untold, of women overlooked, voices unheard. Today, this moment wasn't just mine." Her words hit like ripples, not waves, quiet but deep. Judge Judy didn't interrupt. She just stood there, listening. And for a woman known across America for her no-nonsense command, her silence said everything. One of the jurors, a middle-aged woman who had sat stone-faced the entire trial, reached into her bag and took out a tissue, dabbing her eyes. Another juror, a young man in a wrinkled dress shirt, shifted uncomfortably like the emotion in the room was too big for his chair. Judge Judy stepped forward again, this time without her usual posture, her arms crossed loosely. "Jasmine," she said, voice level and low, "I've presided over thousands of hearings. I've met people who game the system, people who lie their way through loopholes. But I've also seen something else. I've seen fighters. And you're one of them." Jasmine looked down for the first time, her hand gently pressing against the table as if grounding herself. Judge Judy's eyes moistened again, just a flicker, but she kept her voice steady. "This fine, I'm not removing it on paper. But I want you to hear me clearly. In every other way that matters, you've already paid the price. You've stood here with dignity, with purpose. And you made me see things I hadn't let myself see in years." Then the unexpected happened. Judge Judy walked over, extended her hand not from behind a desk or from a place of authority, but woman to woman. Jasmine hesitated just a second, then accepted. It wasn't a power move. It was a passing of the torch. In that single gesture, something cracked open in the courtroom. The pressure dissolved just enough for people to breathe again. Jasmine didn't smile yet. She wasn't here for performance. But there was a flicker of softness around her eyes, the kind that comes only when walls begin to come down. Judge Judy looked at the clerk. "Make a note that this court encourages a formal review of congressional financial conduct cases. We need to rethink how we're treating the people we say we represent." The clerk scribbled quickly, clearly caught off guard. And still Jasmine stood. She didn't ask for applause. There was none. Just the silent approval of 100 held breaths finally being exhaled. The fine remained, but it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what Jasmine Crockett had just done. She turned a courtroom, one of the most televised, scrutinized places in the country, into something sacred. Into a place where truth wasn't shouted or argued, but simply revealed. And Judge Judy, for once in her long career, didn't have the last word. That belonged to Jasmine now. The room had grown quieter now. Not because of a judge's command or a gavel strike, but because something sacred had settled in the space between Jasmine and Judge Judy, two powerful women. Generations apart, ideologies apart, but meeting on the same ground. For a moment, the courtroom felt less like a battleground and more like a bridge. Jasmine still hadn't sat down. She stood next to the witness table, hands resting on the edge like she needed the wood to anchor her, her heart visibly pulsing beneath her blazer. The cameras were off, but everyone knew the real show was happening now. Even without national broadcast, these moments would echo far louder than any media headline could contain. Judge Judy looked around slowly, letting the silence breathe. She wasn't rushing to close this case. She wasn't trying to win the room with some final zinger. This wasn't that kind of courtroom moment. Her face had changed, not softened, but deepened. "Let me tell you something, Jasmine," she said, her voice steady and slightly lower. "Years ago, when I started wearing this robe, I promised myself I'd never let my job make me cold. But it did. It's easy to get numb when you see the worst of people every day. But today, you reminded me why I started doing this in the first place. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting justice. You brought that back into this room." Jasmine swallowed hard, her throat visibly moved. The weight of the moment pressed heavy on her chest. She opened her mouth once, paused, then spoke slowly, honestly. "I came here ready to lose everything. I thought this courtroom was the end of something. But you made it a beginning." In the gallery, someone sniffled. A reporter wiped his glasses, pretending they were fogged up by humidity, not tears. Even the bailiff, a stone-faced man built like a linebacker, looked slightly away, jaw tight. The room had shifted from courtroom to sanctuary. Judge Judy stepped down fully from the bench this time, her robe swaying softly with each step. She walked past the jury box, past the court reporter's station, and right up to Jasmine Crockett. She didn't just shake her hand this time, she held it. Two hands, firm, present, real. "You're going to keep making waves," she said, "but don't ever let this system tell you what kind of storm you're allowed to be." Jasmine laughed through her nose, just barely, a small sound that caught in her throat. "I won't," she whispered. "I promise." Judge Judy turned to the room and raised her voice, not in anger, but in truth. "Let it be known on record that while this court upholds its ruling, the spirit of justice today has been something more, something we don't see enough. Courage, humility, and a voice that cannot and should not be silenced." A spontaneous standing ovation broke out in the gallery. No one planned it. No one asked for it. It was just real. A raw response to something that transcended the usual courtroom theater. People clapped not because of victory, but because they had just witnessed integrity. And then, something almost no one expected, Judge Judy reached into her desk, pulled out a folded envelope, and walked back to Jasmine. "This isn't from the court," she said, her voice quiet again. "This is from me. It's a personal donation. I'm not paying your fine. You've paid it already in sweat and grace. But this is seed money, to start something new. Something bigger than this courtroom." Jasmine stared at the envelope. Her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted it. She didn't look inside. She didn't need to. The gesture had already spoken louder than numbers ever could. "Thank you," she said, "not just for this, but for seeing me." Judge Judy nodded. That's the job, seeing people. Not judging their past, but holding space for their future. And with that, Jasmine turned, stepping toward the exit of the courtroom, not with her head bowed, not with defeat trailing behind her, but like a woman stepping forward into legacy. As she passed the doors, one older woman in the crowd reached out and touched Jasmine's sleeve lightly. "You made us proud," she whispered. Jasmine turned her head, tears threatening again, and gave the woman a small nod. Outside the courtroom, cameras were waiting. Journalists were scrambling. But Jasmine paused just beyond the double doors, looking back one last time, not at the people, not at the headlines, but at the room itself. At what had happened in that room. She had come in a defendant. She was leaving something else entirely. A force, a symbol. And somewhere behind those courtroom doors, Judge Judy finally allowed herself one small smile. Not for the cameras, not for the court, but for hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the world was still capable of listening.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.